everybody, and welcome to this week's Bodacity Show. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and I'm here today with the fabulous Stacey Shipman. We are talking about how to shed the formality and network like a natural. I met Stacey, I'll give you a formal intro in just a moment, but I met her at one of her events. I think that's where I met you. Is that where I met you, Stacey?
We were connected because I went to a different event and someone suggested that you and I connect. And
Right.
then you came to one of my events.
There you go. That was it. Okay. Various networking and
Yes.
things. And what I really love and appreciate about you, Stacey, and about how you do what you do is lots of authenticity, real great connections, and frankly, you curate and bring together really quality people. I do a lot of networking. Too much. And I got to tell you, you have and attract a real quality level of people who actually follow through, who are very collaborative, who actually really do a lot to support one another. I really appreciate that about the group that you gather together. Welcome. Let me introduce Stacey. Stacey Shipman is a podcast host, event organizer, and creator of Engage the Room, where her mission is to shed formalities that stifle personalities and ideas. Because you can't advocate for yourself or your genius hiding behind I'm too busy, perfectionism, PowerPoints, collaborators who get all the credit, or the belief that you need more credentials. Plus, human connection is impossible when you're acting like a robot. Boring, bland, and basic are default settings, but they aren't the only settings. Amen. With Stacey's guidance, you can drop learned behaviors that never felt natural in the first place, step out of the conventional bubble, and engage people with who you really are. Thank you for being here, Stacey. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Now, having said all of that, everybody, let me do this. I'm going to ask you to tell us, as we normally do, a little bit about yourself that we wouldn't guess or get from your formal intros or reading your About Us page. What's one thing we just wouldn't guess or know about you?
People who know me today don't realize that in sixth grade I won the Quietest Girl Award, and that I'm actually a pretty shy person, especially around people that I don't know, but my childhood dream was to become a singer. I always had this conflict and of want and desire versus shyness and fear. And so that's something that a lot of people who know me today don't realize, given the work that I do. I've had to overcome all that to get to where I am now. And I do take voice lessons, singing lessons, and I dabble in stand-up comedy.
Oh, that's so cool. You're right. And that's very cool. And there's a lot of professional speakers and leaders and so forth who are introverts. And you wouldn't necessarily guess it. I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert by training and an introvert by nature. There's lots of people like you and I who we're out there, we're out front, and we're speaking and all that kind of stuff. And you wouldn't know that there lurked a shy girl behind all of that. Right. I think I've pretty much overcome my shyness. People would definitely not let me use that word about myself.
People find it hard to believe when I say that about myself.
Exactly. I love the bodacious red, by the way. Okay, I tell you what I'm going to do. I know it's a little weird, everybody, but I am going to go upstairs while Stacey does some beautiful, wonderful, extemporaneous education here and tells you a little bit about three things, Stacey. What I'd love to hear is why are you so passionate about the work you do? Why do you do what you do? I'm really curious about that and how you got into this, especially given your origin of being a shy girl and so forth. And we're here to talk about networking in a much more natural way. Can you give us some tips and hints about ways that people can network now? Is that different than how it used to be? What's your take on really a productive way to network and be authentic and show up? Why do you care, and how do we do this? And is it any different now than it used to be?
Okay. I'm writing all of this down so that I don't forget when you're...
I know, there's a test. This is what happens in the wild and wacky world of being live and online and so forth is repair people show up and so on. Here, so take it away, Stacey. I will hand the mic over to you, and I'm listening and I am here. I'm just going to go off camera so I don't distract you all.
Okay. Well, this is not what I expected, but I'll answer Jeanette's first question about why I do what I do. And really, given that I was the quietest girl in sixth grade, it's been an evolution, but I really believe that the world needs each individual person, you and your ideas, and we can't hide, as we heard in my bio, but I did hide quite a bit. It's been an evolution to get to where I am now, but really the driver is everybody has a message or a story or knowledge that somebody else needs to know. And we have to sometimes work through the fear and resistance to put it out in the world in our own way. And that's the crux behind my Shed the Formality approach, is that we have to be able to do it in a way that works for us versus what other people often tell us. The big why is everybody has an idea or knowledge that deserves to be heard, and the world needs to hear it. As I mentioned, it's been my evolution, and this work came to me. I didn't come to it. I actually started my self-employment career. My corporate career was research, working behind the scenes, and I quite liked it. And then I quit in 2006 and pursued wellness, my passion, which was wellness, and then had to learn how to put myself out there promoting a business. And it was really hard. But I soon realized, after having an experience where a woman, after I guided people through a meditation, and she came up to me with tears in her eyes, telling me that for 15 years she'd experienced chronic pain as an adult, but for her adult life, she experienced chronic pain, but in the 15 minutes of that meditation and that relaxation, she didn't have any pain. And that was really the moment that I realized, oh my gosh, I know things that can make a difference in somebody's life, and I need to get over myself and be able to share this better and in a more positive and comfortable way for me. That was my kind of kick in the pants to change my attitude towards putting myself out there.
I love that. And I love that you, like many people, have gone through that whole struggle of, okay, I've got a business all of a sudden, and now I need to put myself out there, and I don't like doing that. How did you find ways that worked for you to be able to do that?
I I've always been willing to do the work when things matter to me, whether it was years ago running marathons or getting my degrees or becoming a yoga teacher. I've always gone through the trouble of doing the work to get the results that I want. And in this case, it was very much the same thing. I didn't want to get another job. That felt like a far greater pain than stepping into these fears. I dug in and did the work. And people always ask me, what did you do? What's your process? I really don't have a process. It was a matter of being aware that where I was really stunk, to be, honest with you. I didn't like how I felt. There was an awareness that I had to have about that. And then I had to recognize that it really was up to me. I've worked with lots of coaches, and they've been fantastic. But the reality was, wait, they can't fix me. I need to own that this is what I want to do. There was an accountability piece. And then the action has been varied. And I always say it's like a giant experiment. It was stepping into all these things. I joined Toastmasters. Like I said, worked with coaches. I went to different conferences. I took writing classes. The comedy and singing came much later in the process, but that was another step into developing myself and my skills. I said yes to opportunities. And it was it was a giant experiment that had great success sometimes and great mess sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so it then became a matter of, for me, like, what's working and what's not, and continue with what works and drop the rest. That, I guess, if I had to have a process, it's awareness, accountability, and then action.
I love that. And I think you actually do have a very specific process. And yes, awareness, accountability, and action, but I also heard a number of steps in there that I think are really important for people, for any of us who want to take action and get some different results. First of all, you got to a point where the pain outweighed the challenge, And
Yeah.
so you were willing to
Right.
create a commitment because you had enough motivation.
Right.
And for most of us, it is that the pain actually is more than the fear or the doubt or the insecurity or whatever is on the other side of that
Right.
scale.
Mm-hmm.
Then you realized you took accountability. If it's going to happen, it's up to me. I have to do this. And that's a big step that I think a lot of people step over is they don't say, yeah, it's not everybody else. It's not if I just take one more program and so forth and so on. It's I actually have to make this happen. But you didn't defer accountability, but you did bring in support, which I
Yes.
think is a really big distinction because some people think that if I hire the coach or take the program, that's the same as taking the action, and it's not.
It's not.
You got support so you would get into action.
Right.
And then I love the piece around you said yes, even when you were uncomfortable. You said yes to things that you didn't like and that you didn't want to go do or that, felt
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable in, but you still
Yeah.
said yes because it
Still
was
say
part of
yes.
that larger commitment. And you walk through both the success and the mess. I love that phrase. And I think that's so important to be willing to be with the mess so that
Yeah.
we can get to the success. And so that I think is an awesome, awesome process.
Okay.
Awareness,
I'm glad we're recording this then.
um, how do you think about networking? A lot of people think about networking and they think, okay, I'm going to go and people are going to puke their elevator pitch all over me and I'm going to puke mine all over them. And oh my God, I got to get it right. And I got to say all the right words in the right order. And they get really bent out of shape around getting the right elevator pitch and so on. And then typically they will gather a bunch of information or save the chat and those go into a folder and then they never look at them again and they don't follow up and they don't do much with it and then they say networking doesn't work. That's what most people do now. What should we be doing?
I have heard that same story over and over from years ago. Where do I start with this? Now, I look at networking as relationship building. When I first walked into or was introduced, my husband told me when I quit my job to start my business, he said, if you want to build a business, you need to network. And I didn't know what that meant. And I just naively thought I was going to go to my first event and people would love me and hire me and all would be good in the world. And that's not how it works. I realized over the last 15 years, for me, really, networking is really about meeting new people, building relationships, sharing ideas and information and resources. There's so much learning that can happen through conversations with both like-minded people, but also with people who have nothing to do with the work that you do, because getting those outside perspectives is so important. I look at it as an opportunity to learn, to meet new people who may or may not be able to support me in my business, or that I may or may not be able to support in their business. And also, quite frankly, as a solo professional, to not be alone all the time and to be around other people and having that social interaction, which is really important. And I know through COVID that in person changed, but it's part of why I brought mine online, because like even more isolation. I've learned that, or my philosophy and what I do now is great networking from a face-to-face or in-person event perspective. I'll start there. It happens with the facilitator, and the facilitator has to have clear goals, intention. They have to show up in the way that they want to show up to have the experience that they want. That leadership sets the tone, whether it's a networking event or a client meeting. How you walk in that room or Zoom room matters. It starts there. I've always had the shy, uncomfortable, awkward person in mind when I host my events, because that's who I am, and can have real empathy for that and what they really need and want to feel comfortable. I've made a commitment to greet everybody, even on Zoom, everybody gets greeted by name, and to really think about what will make this the most comfortable and productive and fun experience for people. Now, I don't think an elevator pitch is what connects us. In fact, I think it can shut down a conversation, because if somebody's not interested, doesn't need it, or doesn't understand it, they're typically not curious enough to go any further. And it can shut down a conversation. I don't do elevator pitches at my networking events for that reason. I offer other conversation starters that get at what you do and to your point, Jeanette, why you do it, but isn't that explicit tension and anxiety creating elevator speech? That's one thing. And I also think real connection happens when we go below the surface. And so when the pandemic first hit, it was really important to me that people had a space to talk about all the things that were going on emotionally. Particularly, a lot of people lost business. I lost business. I was really adamant about this is not okay. And it's okay to talk about what's not okay. And that I think creates even deeper connections. For me, it's all about how do you really create a connection with people? The event is a catalyst for that, but it's not the end, as you already pointed out. The real work happens after that. You've met all these people, you have a list of names of people that you haven't met. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to use that and capitalize on that in some way? And you may not know. We often don't know. It's not a sales. What networking is not is sales. It's really, and I think that trips up a lot of people thinking that's what networking is. If you go in thinking that, then there is going to be tension and awkwardness, and you're not going to want to talk to people and they're not going to want to talk to you. But if you look at it as who can I meet today? And then explore after the fact, how can we support each other? You may not know for a year, you may not know for 5 years, but it's consistently showing up, talking about what you do in a comfortable way, talking about what's important to you and what support you do need. If we don't talk about it, nobody knows. That doesn't help anybody. And then the reach out, the outreach and staying in touch, the consistency of that. That's often where people fall short.
Yeah, I know it is an area that I struggle with, and part of that is because I haven't systemized that. But I want to come back to that in just a second.
Yeah.
There was a lot that you said that I think is really important. They're subtle distinctions, but they're really significant. I think that I often liken marketing to dating and sales to marriage proposals and or moving in together. And that just like in dating, typically on a first date, you don't go and stick your tongue down someone's throat because that's considered rude. But in our networking, we often do the equivalent of that. And it's, yeah, no.
That doesn't feel good.
Yeah, exactly. What are some of the things, for example, that you do that support people in connecting rather than just saying an elevator pitch? What are some of the things that at a networking event, for example, someone could do besides walk up and say, hi, I'm a please and don't, for the love of God, don't say this. I'm a coach, author, speaker, because no one gives a shit if you are, frankly. What they care about is what you do. What do you do for them? But what's an alternative to walking up and saying, here's what I do? What are some things that you do at networking events that are different and set you apart?
I've done in person and online. Do you want me to talk about both or one or the other?
Yep.
Okay. I'll start with online because it's most fresh in my mind. But the way I format mine, I do some sort of quick, fast icebreaker. It takes like a minute. It gets people in a fast, energized, fun, hopefully laughing place. And then sometimes that relates to the first breakout session, and sometimes it doesn't. But for example, sometimes I have people think to themselves about the word networking and what does networking mean to you? When you hear that word, what comes up? Now go discuss. or I ask them, why do you do what you do? Or what energizes or excites you about your work right now? Or what challenges have you faced that you've overcome? And there's different types of questions that I'm not afraid to dig in quickly. I'll just put that out there. I'm not afraid to do that. And I'm not afraid to guide people into that space either. I start with a fast icebreaker. Lately I've been putting people in pairs with a conversation starter and examples of what I just gave you. Then I put them in a slightly larger group, maybe of 4 people, and have them introduce their partner. And then we come back. And then the final part is with Zoom, I have themed rooms that people can move around on their own and pick the rooms that they want to go into and talk about the different conversations. And some of those rooms over the last year and a half have been everything from just for fun, talking about hobbies and trips, travel, things like that, just fun things that are non-business related. We've talked about how to promote yourself, or who you need to meet or who you'd like to meet to help grow your business, the support you need. We've talked about how to manage stress and burnout as an entrepreneur. Talked about what else? No, it gives you an idea
Yeah.
of what some of those rooms are. I had a rants and complaints room one time 'cause people were like, I just need to I just need to rant. Can you have a room up for that? It's like, sure. So this is for you, whatever you need. But I keep them fast moving. I don't do a lot of large group interaction. It depends on the size of the group. If I do call out to have a few comments, but it's really about getting those folks who attended talking to each other. That's how I run the online ones. They're only an hour. And then in person, it was really important to me that every single person who attended my events got greeted by me personally. I was there, I had helpers to check people in, but I greeted everybody and I introduced them to their first person, especially if they came alone. So a lot of people go alone. I always found for me, if I was introduced to that first person, it was like, okay, I can do this. I make that part of my in-person. And I also had icebreakers for people. I would give them little stickers with, again, conversation starters, prompts, everything from you just came into $100,000, how are you going to spend it? Or if you had a theme song for your business or for your life, what would it be and why? Different things like that. What people have told me, Jeanette, is I give them permission to kind of let loose, bring their awkward, quirky, silly, playful self, serious self, whoever you are, without feeling like I have to act a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and just by, again, it starts with the person who's hosting. I've been to events where nobody even greets you at the door. What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So
Exactly. If you're attending a networking event and someone comes up and says, "What do you do?" which is the very typical kind of networking question. "Hi, what do you do?" And then they don't listen. But what do you say when someone asks you that question?
oh, I have a couple of ways that I do it. If I'm in the right mindset, I'll go in a different direction. If I don't want to be there, I just go with it and keep moving. But a couple of other ways is by, and you've probably heard this, and folks listening have probably heard it, by asking the question. You know, some people feel awkward and uneasy putting themselves out there, networking and speaking. Why make that easier for people? Present it that way. And then otherwise, if I'm feeling a little sassy, I'll say, I'd rather tell you why I do what I do. And that takes courage. And I'm not saying you're going to come out the gates and do things a different way. It's definitely a practice. But
Right.
those are a couple of different ways that have worked for me and I think are a little more interesting for people and engaging for people.
I love that. And I personally, as the why whisperer, really advocate that. Here, let me
I
tell you
know.
why I do what I do instead of what I do, because I think that people care more about that, frankly, and it's different and it catches their attention and it's more, it typically, or it should, deepen the connection and the authentic kind of conversation.
I may add to
Yeah,
that. Doing it that way, I think the why gets at the emotion behind what you do. And as humans, that's how we connect. We connect through emotion. And telling people our title is a little bit more heady. I'm a coach, I'm a consultant, and that's very logical.
very interesting for most
Yeah.
people, except for us. I like to talk about me, but no one else wants to hear it. I love those ideas for ways to create different kind of networking, whether you're doing a live event or if you're doing a networking meeting, or even if you've just got a mastermind or something that you are
Yeah.
working with and you want to keep them more engaged, then these are some great ideas and suggestions. And it doesn't have to be complicated or complex. You can just put them together and let them talk. Stacey, I've been doing this for, I don't know, the better part of 40 years. And I am constantly still surprised by how much people appreciate and get value out of simply talking to one another. Like just giving people a space to be heard, to be seen,
Mhm.
and to be received.
Mhm.
And we complicate it a lot. We make it about a whole bunch of other things, and really, people just want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be received. And beyond that, then yes, there might be support and connections and so forth. Just coming back really quickly, I could talk to you about this for hours, but we are almost out of time. How do you manage the relationships? Because frankly, there's a lot of them, especially if you're an active networker. And how do you keep track of who's who and how to maintain connection and where to add value and so forth and so on? Because people often say create a relationship, but really, what does that mean? Because for many people, having a relationship means that we go to the movies together or we hang out or you invite me to your birthday or But what does it mean when you say build a relationship? What does that actually mean? Two questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait.
Yeah. What do you mean by relationship?
Okay.
And how do you keep track of your people so that you can stay in touch and nurture that?
How do I define? So that's it. Nobody's ever asked me how I define relationship. That's interesting. For me, I'll define it for myself. For the relationships I have, there's trust, there's ease. I feel comfortable reaching out for whatever I might need. And that's because we have kept in touch over time. And I think that leads to your second question. But it's not easy, and it can often be awkward or anxiety provoking. For example, I recently got an email from somebody that I met in person networking a number of years ago. I believe she might be on my email newsletter list, but we have not spoken. We have not been in one-to-one email contact. And out of the blue, she sent, we've been 2 years in a pandemic, probably 3 or 4 years that we've seen each other in person. Out of the blue, she wrote me a message. I love your newsletters. I just wrote a book. I'm hoping you'll buy it on Amazon. And I was like, what? That's not maintaining a relationship. I didn't feel like I had the relationship with her that she, it made me feel weird getting the ask. And I certainly would never have done that with her because we haven't been in touch. Maintaining the relationship is trust, it's consistency of outreach, and that doesn't mean it has to be every day. And it's at ease reaching out when you do need something. I know we're probably out of time, but to move into the other question, I had worked with a marketing coach a number of years ago, and he gave me a great framework that I still use. So he broke it down as, who are your top 50? And those are the people you probably talk to on a very regular basis. Again, not necessarily daily, but maybe weekly. You see them, you talk to them, you reach out. Who are your top 50? And then he moved into top 100. And then he went to, I think, a third bucket of like the top 250 to 300, and then your newsletter. And then those people you may or may not know. And then you can set the parameters around, how am I going to stay in touch? My top 50, I'm in touch with them pretty frequently, at least monthly. We go back and forth, even if it's just idle chit chat or, hey, how you doing? The next level is, I look at it as quarterly, just an outreach. Hi, been thinking about you. What's going on? I saw this article. I thought of our last conversation or something like that. And then again, the newsletter is, I send one every 2 weeks. People hear from me pretty frequently.
Cool. And how have you found your newsletter? Again, I know we're almost out of time, but because some people say newsletters are dead and other people say they're really popular, how do you find it as a way to just keep in touch? And by the way, I'm assuming it's also a great vehicle for you to do contribution on an ongoing basis, because part of that, what do you do when you reach out, is you provide value. How have you found your newsletter as a vehicle?
My newsletter has been really good especially through COVID. My open rate increased. I think before COVID, it was like 22%. Now I'm getting close to 40% open rates. Wow. About 25% click through, because most people are clicking on my events to register or something like that. My newsletter has been fantastic for me. That made me say, okay, I think I need to grow this as a marketing opportunity. But the way I format, and you can find mine if you go to my homepage, engagetheroom.com, and scroll all the way down, you'll see on the bottom a way to sign up, and you'll get 10 conversation starters, as we were talking about earlier. I have an article, and I have my events, and I put my podcast. It's not a heavy salesy kind of newsletter. It really is information and storytelling. I've always said I want my events and my marketing to feel like you've just walked into my home. That's how I want people to feel when they're interacting with me online or in person. That's what I try to put out there.
Yep, I think you do a brilliant job of it. Thank you so much. I think there's some great tips here. Again, I would love to continue the conversation because I think it's so fascinating, and because so many people are now doing more and more networking online, certainly through COVID, but I think that's going to persist. Even when we can go back to live, we'll still do virtual because it gives us that global reach, but also not everybody's up for being back live completely or fully or with large groups or whatever yet.
Well, it's efficient too. You don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't take a half a day. An hour long meeting is an hour long.
Yeah, exactly. You can actually get a lot more in a day if you don't have to drive here, there, and everywhere. There is a missing in the energy of lives, but they are still very effective.
Yeah.
However, you do have to follow up. I love your tip about have your lists, work those lists, and select your lists. Like as you're networking people, maybe you put someone on your list, but maybe that means you go through periodically and cull out other ones that there's
Right.
not as good a fit or they're not responding or interested or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. It doesn't have to be that you stay in touch with thousands of people.
Right.
You actually quality, not quantity. That's a nice approach to make this a lot more manageable for people. Just out of
And
curiosity, do you keep yours in a CRM or do you use a spreadsheet or how do you physically manage your contacts?
it's been spreadsheet and in my head, which is not a good play. I don't recommend that. But I'm going to start using Less Annoying, I think.
Okay, less annoying CRM. Yep, there's a lot of people who I've heard that
Yeah.
really like it, and you gotta love the title if
I
anything
know.
else.
If we can end on two things, one is it's okay to evolve from the people in your network. I want to make sure that the relationships you made, the relationships I made 15 years ago, some people I'm in touch with, but a lot of them I'm not. Because as we evolve, so do the people we want to be around. So I want to share, put that out there. And I think an untapped opportunity for networking, especially right now, is videos like this, lives, podcasts. People do these conversations because they want, it's a networking opportunity. As a listener, I just want to put out there, if you hear from somebody, whether it's me or someone else, reach out, because that you don't know where that's going to go. It's not about selling. It's simply saying, hey, I heard you on Jeanette's thing, or I heard Jeanette on someone else's thing, and I'd love to connect because I love what you said about XYZ. I think this is a really untapped networking opportunity too.
Yeah, I think so too. I just shared the link for your Engage the Room networking events. Go and register for those if you're a fit for Stacey's events. I just want to share one last tip before we wrap up here. Something that someone from one of your networking events did that I thought was brilliant, haven't seen before, and that I now try and do as well. And I think it was Susan, but I can't remember her last name, who sent an email to, so I met her at the networking event.
Mm-hmm.
We had a discovery call or a What's Your Why Whisperer call, which she was grateful for and got some good value out of, but she took the time to email Stacey and thank Stacey for creating the event where we could connect and sang my praises, which I thought was very lovely, a wonderful step to take to thank the networking host for bringing you together with that other person. It was thoughtful, it was smart, it was remarkable. Literally, I have acknowledged her multiple times since then for that very simple reach out. And that's the kind of thing that develops relationships of win-win-win all the way around. Do you remember her last name?
Susan Finn? Was it Susan
Yeah,
Finn?
Susan Finn, yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
I'm 90% sure it was her. If it wasn't
I
her,
think I remember seeing her post that in
yeah.
one of her groups. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Not only did she send Stacey an email, but she also posted it on Facebook in one of her groups, which I thought was also brilliant. And an advocate. Part of networking is not just what can I get, it's what can I give. And so I think you mentioned it's not just about sales, it's not just about connecting even. It's really about going in with the perspective of how can I serve and who are these people, what do they need, what can I bring to this party, and yes, who can I meet, what do I need, what's going to support me as well. But
Mm-hmm.
really, when we go with an attitude of service, then there's so much that comes out of it, and it sets up reciprocity. There's just so many wins.
That's how we stay memorable, which is why you remember Susan. You may not remember her last name, but you remember her.
Absolutely,
And
yeah. I
that's
thought it was Susan Finn, but I also just met another Susan, and I didn't want to give them the last one. Thank you.
But you could have reached out to me to find out. You
Yes.
knew where, and that's how we build the trust and that relationship. And it's you give until you need. Don't give too much because then we get depleted.
I was going to say, well, and then there's people who do the opposite or go the opposite extreme.
Yeah.
And all they do is give, and they never actually engage in a conversation around how do we move you or me or both of us forward. And they don't actually turn it into, they just date forever. they never get married. And so sometimes you got to actually commit.
Right.
The question, right? Don't date forever. Those girls that just go, well, yes, but he loves me, and so I'll just keep hanging out. Yeah, no. Pop the question. Let's go, but don't do it on the first date for the love of God.
I mean, unless it comes up, right? But most of the time, it's not.
Yeah. Typically, that's true. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Stacey, and thank you for your flexibility as I, adapting and changing locations and telling the internet service repair guy, don't turn off my internet until at least 1:30.
Then.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate you being here. Thank you all for coming, everybody. If you've got questions, please check out the chat below this interview for all of the connections to ways to reach Stacey. Reach out, attend one of her events. Great networking event, lots of fun. As you can tell from her format, it's very different. And please do really think about networking as it being more than just ways to go want 'em, got 'em, need 'em, and to actually go out and be who you are, have fun with it, and really show up in a different way where you're present and being authentic and engaging and not just waiting for people to stop talking so you can tell them all about you. Be a human. I will see you all soon. And thank you so much for being here, Stacey. I appreciate you. Have a bodacious week, everybody. Please apply this to all of your networking, and I look forward to seeing you in some networking room soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.